The handcuffs were cold. The metal bit into my wrists, and the only thought in my head was that this was my own damn house. That Sheriff Randall leaned in close. His breath smelled like coffee and cheap tobacco, the kind he rolled himself in that yellowed paper. "Henry Ford," he said, not a question but a statement. "We got a call about an unlawful entry on private property. You're going to have to come with us." I looked down at my shirt. Old flannel, faded red and black, the elbows worn thin. Then I looked past him, at the lawn, at the man standing there with his ARMS crossed over his chest. My stepson, Brian. He was smiling. Not a happy smile. The kind of smile a man we RS when he thinks he has already won. Next to Brian stood a young officer in a crisp blue uniform. Tom Gray. I remembered pinning a commendation medal on his chest 3 years ago at the community fundraiser dinner. His mother had cried. She said she was proud. I had told him then that he had a good future ahead of him if he kept his head straight. He would not look at me now. His eyes were fixed somewhere over my shoulder, on the patrol CAR. And next to Tom, in a cheap but pressed suit, stood Kevin H.A. Riss, the local real estate RK. He ride a leather briefcase and wore rimless glasses that caught the afternoon sun. He was whispering something to Tom, and Tom nodded like a boy being told what to do. Brian took a step four-way road. He kept his hands in his jacket pockets, casual, relaxed. "Dad," he said, his voice ride. The neighbors were coming out of their houses now. Old Morris from across the street stood on his porch with a coffee mug in his hand, watching. "I thought you were off on that fishing trip. You said you would be gone 3 weeks. I looked at him. "I came home EARLY. That's the problem, Dad." He spread his hands, that sorry not sorry gesture he had perfected over the YRS. "You didn't tell anyone. The house is being renovated. Full gut job. New plumbing, new wiring, new everything. I told the contractors to START last Monday. The workers don't know you. They saw an old man walking around inside. They got spooked. They called the cops. I can't blame them." "Renovated," I said. "With whose money?" His face flickered. Just for a second. Then the smile came back. "Yours, Dad. Who else? You signed the power of attorney last year. Remember the doctor said you needed someone to handle things." "The EARLY stages," he said. "Memory issues. You were forgetting appointments, leaving the stove on. We were worried. Me and Megan. We talked it over, and we decided it was best if I took CA of the property decisions for a while." I let that sit in the air. The neighbors were close enough now that I could hear Mrs. Patterson whispering to her husband. "Poor Mr. Ford," she said. I always knew his mind was going. "The doctor," I said. "Dr. Albright." "That's the one." Brian nodded. "He said you needed rest. A smaller place. So we found a buyer for this house. Nice couple from the city. They want to move in by Christmas. Kevin here is handling the paperwork. We were just getting the place Cleo read out." Kevin H.A. Riss adjusted his glasses and gave me a thin, professional nod. "It's all above BOA RD, Mr. Ford. Your son has been very diligent. The transfer is scheduled for next week." "Transfer," I said. "Of my house." "Of the house," Brian corrected. "Your house, Dad. But you signed the papers. You gave me the authority. I'm just trying to take CA of you." Sheriff Randall had had enough of the conversation. He reached for my ARM and pulled me Tawa RD the cruiser. "We'll sort it out downtown, Mr. Ford. Right now, I got a complaint on file, and I got to follow procedure." Tom Gray opened the back door of the cruiser for me. His hand trembled just a little as he reached for my shoulder to guide me down into the seat. He still would not meet my eyes. "I'm sorry, sir," he whispered. So quiet no one else could hear. I looked at him. "For what, Tom?" He did not answer. He shut the door and walked back to stand with Brian. The seat was hot RD plastic, and the handcuffs bit into my wrists every time the cruiser hit a bump. Sheriff Randall drove slow, the way old cops do, one hand on the wheel and the other resting on his thigh. He kept glancing in the REA review mirror at me, like he expected me to START yelling or crying or confessing. I sat still. I watched the familia our street roll past. The RDWA restore I had bought nails from to fix the porch swing. The diner where I ate breakfast every Tuesday and Thursday, and where old Morris always sat in the same booth and complained about the price of eggs. The library where I had donated a set of first edition history books last spring, quietly, without making a fuss about it. This was my town. Or it had been. Until today. The police station was the same beige brick building it had always been. I had been inside twice before. Once to fill out a report about a stolen bicycle from my shed, and once to serve on a jury for a drunk driving case. The jurors had all agreed I was fair-minded. The judge had thanked me personally that now I was sitting in an interview room with fluorescent lights that buzzed overhead and a metal table bolted to the floor, but Randall took my wallet, my keys, my phone. He spread them out on the table like evidence. My wallet was old leather, worn smooth at the edges. Inside was a $20 AR bill, a Libra Re CARD, and a black credit CARD with no bank logo on it. Randall picked it up, turned it over, and tossed it aside. He did not recognize it. My keys were on a brass ring. Among them was a tarnished brass key, old-fashioned, the kind that opened a heavy lock. He pushed that aside too. Your stepson says you wandered off from the assisted living center last month, Randall said. He was filling out a form, writing slowly, pressing HRD with the pen. Got lost for almost 2 days before they found you down by the river. I was in Montana, I said. Fly fishing. I stayed at a lodge called the Broken OAR. The owner's name is Bill Haskins. You can call him. Randall paused. He looked up at me with narrowed eyes. Montana. You drove to Montana. I flew. By yourself, by myself. He wrote something down. We'll verify that. But right now, your stepson is pressing charges for trespassing on private property. The legal paperwork is in order. The power of attorney is valid and notarized. And then there's this. He pointed at my keychain. At the red-handled Swiss, a Remain knife attached to it. Blades over 3 inches. That's a violation of local ordinance. Could be a concealed weapon RG. I looked at the knife. The old man in Switzerland who had given it to me had said it was for cutting fishing line and opening wine bottles. He had smiled when he handed it over, said it had crossed the Alps on foot with his grandfather in 1945. It's a tool. I said, it's a knife, Randall said. And right now, it's evidence. He finished his form and stood up. You want to call a lawyer? I thought about it. I want to call my son. Randall raised an eyebrow. He's the one who filed the complaint. Not Brian, I said. My other son. He looked confused for a moment. You have another son, yes, I said. His name is Jack. Randall shrugged and pushed the desk phone across the table. Go ahead. One call. I dialed the number from memory. It rang 4 times, and then a man's voice answered. He sounded tired, like he had not slept in a while. Hello. Jack, I said. It's your father. There was a pause. Then the voice sharpened. Dad. Where are you? I gave him the address of the police station. He did not ask why. He just said, I'll be there, and hung up. Randall took the phone back and looked at me with a question in his eyes. He lives in town. No, I said. He lives in Washington. Randall's mouth opened, then closed. Then he shrugged again and led me to a holding cell at the back of the station. The cell had a narrow bunk with a thin mattress and a toilet without a seat. The door clanged shut behind me, and I heard the lock slide home. The man in the next cell was snoring. Loud, wet snores that rattled the bars. I sat down on the bunk and leaned back against the concrete wall. The fluorescent light outside the cell hummed and flickered. I counted the cracks in the ceiling. There were 14. I was not worried. I was just cold. The jacket I had been wearing when I came home EARLY was still hanging on the hook in the front hall of my house. Or what used to be my house. Brian had probably thrown it in the trash by now. But that was fine. Let him throw things away. Let him think he had won. Let him and Megan divide up my furniture and my books and my records like vultures on a dead tree. They had been doing it for years, waiting for me to slow down, waiting for me to make a mistake, waiting for me to die. They just did not know who they were waiting on. 2 hours passed. Maybe 3. I dozed off once and woke up to the snoring man shouting at the ceiling about his ex-wife. Then footsteps came down the hall. Heavy boots, quick steps. Someone was in a hurry. The cell door opened. Sheriff Randall stood in the doorway. His face was pale. Sweat beaded on his forehead. He was holding a stack of papers in both hands, and his knuckles were white. Mr. Ford, he said. His voice was different now. Softer. Almost shy. You're free to go. I did not get up. My stepson, he's here. In the building. My lawyer, he's here too. Randall stepped aside. And there, in the narrow hallway, stood Jack. He was taller than I remembered. He had lost weight around his face, and there was stubble on his jaw, the RK against his pale skin. His suit was rumpled, his tie loosened at the collar. He had Clea RLY come straight from somewhere important. Behind him stood two other men. One was old, gray-haired, dressed in an impeccable three-piece suit with a gold watch chain across his vest. He ride an alligator skin briefcase. The other was younger, in a plain navy jacket with no insignia. Jack came to the cell door and put his hand through the bars. I reached out and shook it. His grip was firm. "Dad," he said. "You okay?" "I'm fine," I said. "How did you get here so fast?" "I was in Boston," he said. "Business." I borrowed a plane from a friend and flew over. Pete came with me. The gray-haired man stepped forward, rode Peter Morrison, my oldest friend, and the Shah Repest estate lawyer on the East Coast. He did not smile, but his eyes were "RM Henry," he said. "You look well. The accommodations better than the last time we read a hotel," I said. He snorted. That was as close to a laugh as he ever got. Jack gestured to the younger man in the navy jacket. "Dad, this is Agent Wilson. He's with the FBI field office in Boston. He was already in the array on another matter, but when he RD your name, he wanted to come say hello." Agent Wilson stepped forward and shook my hand through the bars. He was about 40, with short-cropped hair and steady gray eyes. "Mr. Ford," he said, quiet enough that only I could hear. "I served with a translator in Kandu 10 years ago. You pulled some strings to get his family out of a bad situation. He talks about you all the time. He's in my squad now." I remembered that. A young man named T.A. Rick, with a wife and 2 small children. The visa paperwork had taken 3 months, and I had made 67 phone calls to push it through. I squeezed Agent Wilson's hand. "Tell him I said hello." "I will, sir." Jack turned to Sheriff Randall. "The paperwork." Randall handed over the stack of papers he had been clutching. His hands shook. "It's all here. The revocation of the power of attorney. Filed 6 months ago. Notarized in D.C., registered with the federal court. Mr. Ford's stepson didn't know. Or he knew and he ignored it. Either way, the authorization he produced is null and void." Peter Morrison stepped forward and took the papers from Randall. He examined them with the slow, deliberate care of a man who had spent 40 years making sure every dotted line was crossed and every signature was authentic. "These documents in order," he said. "My client, Henry Ford, never lost his legal rights to the property in question. The medical diagnosis used to justify the power of attorney came from a physician who lost his license 2 years ago for fraudulent billing and falsified patient records. I've already forwarded all relevant materials to the district attorney's office and to your legal counsel, Sheriff." Randall swallowed. His Adam's apple bobbed up and down. "I didn't know. The complaint was filed properly. I had to act on it." "Of course you did," Peter said. His tone was not unkind. It was worse. It was perfectly calm. "And now that you have the correct information, I trust you'll act accordingly." Randall nodded rapidly. He looked like a man who wanted to be anywhere else. Agent Wilson spoke up. "Sheriff, before you go, there's one more thing. Your officer, Tom Gray. He was present at the scene of the alleged incident. He's a young man. I'd like to speak with him. And I'll need to interview Mr. Brian Ford and his attorney, Mr. Kevin H.A. Riss, Riga, writing possible charges of fraud and conspiracy to commit property theft." Randall opened his mouth, but no words came out. At that moment, the door at the end of the hallway opened, and 2 uniformed deputies led Brian and Kevin H.A. Riss out of an interview room. Brian's hands were now cuffed behind his back. He saw me standing in the hallway, and his face went through 3 emotions in the span of 2 seconds. Confusion, denial, then pure, naked fear. "Dad," he shouted. "Dad, what's going on? Tell them this is a mistake. I didn't do anything wrong. Megan and I were just trying to take care of you." I walked toward him, slowly, deliberately. My old knees ached from sitting on the hot bunk, but I did not let it show. I stopped a foot away from him. "The safe in the basement," I said. "Behind the 3rd brick on the west wall. You didn't find it, did you?" Brian's eyes went wide. "What safe?" "There's no safe. I searched that house top to bottom. There's nothing in the basement but old boxes and that broken-down furnace." "You searched," I said, "but you didn't find it. Because you never lived in that house, Brian. You never spent a single night in that room I saved for you when you were a boy. You didn't know about the loose floorboard in the kitchen. You didn't know the back door sticks in the summer and needs a shove to close. You didn't know where your mother kept her favorite teacup. His face twisted. That's not fair. You never treated me like your real son. You always favored Jack. You sent him to private school. You paid for his college. I had to work my way through community college. I had to. You had to, I repeated. You had a mother who loved you, and a stepfather who paid for your tuition anyway. But you never saw that. You only saw what you didn't get. And now, you're going to see what you lose. I turned away from him. The deputies pulled him to the booking desk, and Kevin H.A. Riss followed, his rimless glasses askew on his nose. H.A. Riss was babbling about rights and appeals and procedural violations, but nobody was listening. Jack came to my side. Dad, what's in the safe? I reached into my pocket and pulled out the brass key. It was RM from being against my leg. Nothing you need to worry about tonight, I said. But tomorrow, you and Pete are going to help me take it to the bank. There are some documents in there that your mother asked me to hold on to. Some investments, some deeds, some letters, and a few things that might surprise Brian's lawyer. Jack nodded. He did not push. Agent Wilson walked past us and paused at the door. Mr. Ford, I'll have a full report filed by morning. If you need anything, you call me directly. I thanked him. He left. Peter Morrison adjusted his watch chain and looked at me with something like approval in his old, sharp eyes. You handled that well, Henry. Most men your age would have lost their temper. I did lose it, I said. 40 years ago, in a different country, with a different kind of enemy. This is just paperwork. Peter laughed. Rusty sound. Sheriff Randall was hovering at the edge of the conversation, obviously unsure whether he should apologize, shake my hand, or pretend to be invisible. I made the decision for him. Sheriff, I said, tomorrow morning, I'd like Tom Gray to come to my house. I have something to discuss with him. Privately. Randall's face went pale again. Mr. Ford, Tom is a good officer. He was just following orders. He didn't know. I agreed. That's the problem. He should have known. But he's young. He can RN. I'd like to talk to him about that. Randall swallowed and nodded. I'll have him there at 9. 8, I said. 8. Yes, 8. Jack drove me home in a rental car. The streets were dark now, lit only by the occasional porch light and the glow of the diner sign at the corner. My house stood at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac. The lights were off, but I could see the outline of the dumpster in the driveway, filled with the debris of Brian's renovation. It made me angry, not at the loss of the things inside, but at the realness of it. At the waste. Jack parked at the curb. He killed the engine, and we sat in the silence for a moment. Dad, he said, you've been keeping a lot of things from me. I turned to look at him. In the dim light of the dashboard, he looked so much like his mother. The same stubborn jaw, the same steady eyes. Not from you, I said. From everyone. It's easier that way. People see what they want to see. He waited. I sighed. Your mother and I had a different life before we came here. I was in government service for 30 years. Not the kind that makes headlines. The kind that makes a man RN how to keep his mouth shut. We came to this town because she wanted peace. She wanted a porch and a den and a place where nobody asked questions. I gave her that. And I gave you that. And Brian and Megan grew up here too, and they never understood why I didn't have a bigger house, a flashier car, a fancier title. They thought I was just a clerk, a paper pusher, an old man with a pension and a failing memory. You let them think that, Jack said. I let everyone think that, I said. It was the safest way. Jack looked at the house. The arcade windows. The dumpster full of debris. Mom would have hated this. Your mother, I said, would have thrown Brian out on his or the first time he mentioned selling the house. And she would have done it without calling the cops. We laughed. Quiet, tired, but real. I got out of the car and walked up the front path. The door was unlocked. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The house smelled like dust and paint thinner and the sharp chemical tang of cleaning supplies. Most of the furniture was gone. The walls were where pictures used to hang. But the floorboards were still solid under my feet. I walked through the kitchen, past the missing refrigerator, past the holes in the drywall where Brian's contractors had to wring out the old wiring. I opened the door to the basement and flicked the light switch. Nothing happened. The power was cut. Jack read behind me with a flashlight from his car. He shone it down the wooden stairs. Want me to go first? I shook my head. I went down the stairs slowly, one at a time, holding the rail. At the bottom, I crossed the concrete floor to the west wall. The bricks were old and uneven. I counted 3 from the corner, then 6 up. I pressed my palm against the mortar. It was loose. I worked the brick out with my fingers, and behind it was a small RK cavity. Inside, I felt the cold surface of the safe. I found the lock and inserted the brass key. It turned with a smooth, heavy click. I did not open the door. Jack came up behind me and stood at my shoulder. "Dad, what's in there?" I looked at the safe, then at the RK basement, then up at the house above us. "Empty and torn apart and waiting to be put back together." "Everything, son," I said. "Everything I thought I left behind. But it turns out, you can't leave it behind. It stays with you. And sometimes, it comes in handy." I pulled the key out and pocketed it. I pushed the brick back into place. Tomorrow, I would open it. Tomorrow, I would take the documents and the bank books and the old photographs to Peter Morrison's office, and we would start the process of untangling all the mess Brian and Megan had made. Tomorrow would be a long day. But tonight, I was home. I climbed back up the stairs with Jack's steadying hand on my elbow. At the top, I looked out the kitchen window at the street. Old Morris had turned on his porch light. It cast a yellow circle on the sidewalk. I would call him in the morning. Apologize for the commotion. Tell him I was fine. That he would not believe me. But he would nod, and he would bring over a cup of coffee, and we would sit on the porch and watch the world go by the way we always did. Brian and Megan could have their lawyers and their schemes and their hollow victories. They could fight for a house that had never been theirs in spirit, but I had something they would never understand. I had the quiet. I had the memories of a woman who loved me until the end. And I had a son who dropped everything and crossed 3 states in an hour because his father made one phone call. That was not nothing. That was everything. End of chapter 1. Chapter 2. The contents of the safe. Megan makes her move. Tom Gray arrives at the doorstep, and old debts come due. Subscribe now to read the next chapter immediately. Your support keeps this story alive, and I've got a whole lot more twists coming your way. Don't miss a single one. Subscribe today. The morning came with rain, and it was the kind of slow, gray drizzle that soaked into everything and made the world smell like wet asphalt and fallen leaves. I stood at the kitchen window with a cup of instant coffee in my hand. The coffee was terrible. Brian's contractors had thrown out my old percolator along with the dining table and the china cabinet, and I had not yet had time to buy a new one. Jack was still asleep on the couch upstairs. He had refused to let me sleep there. He said an old man needed a proper bed. I did not argue. I was too tired and too grateful to have him here. The dumpster in the driveway was still there. I watched the rain hit the metal sides and run down in thin, silver streaks. Somewhere inside that dumpster was my wife's favorite quilt, the one she had made by hand when Jack was a baby. Patchwork, blue and yellow SQA residential that did not quite match. She had never been a perfect seamstress, but she had been determined that I finish the coffee and set the mug in the empty sink. The house felt hollow without her things. The walls were bare, and the floors were scuffed where the furniture had been dragged out. But the bones were still good. The foundation was solid. I had made sure of that when I bought the place 30 years ago. At 8 o'clock exactly, the doorbell rang. I opened the door. Tom Gray stood on the front porch, his uniform wet at the shoulders, his cap in his hands. He was young, Rely 25, with a face that still had the softness of a boy who had not seen enough of the world. His eyes were red-rimmed. He had not slept well. "Mr. Ford," he said. "The sheriff said you wanted to see me." "I did," I said. "Come in." He stepped inside and looked around at the empty rooms. The walls with their ghostly rectangles where pictures had hung. The floor with its grooves and scratches telling a story I knew by heart. "I'm sorry," he said. "About yesterday. I should have said something. I should have. You should have done what you were told," I said. "That's what they teach you at the academy. Follow orders. Trust the chain of command. Don't make waves." "Right," he nodded. "Miserable. Tom, you've known me for 3 years. I came to your graduation. I gave you a medal that I had to argue with the town council to approve. I came to your mother's house when your father was in the hospital, and I sat with her in the waiting room for 4 hours while he was in surgery." "I know," he said. "That's why I feel so guilty," I said. "Good. That's the right feeling. But guilt doesn't fix anything. What I need from you is understanding." He looked at me, confused. That I walked to the back door and opened it. The rain was coming down hard now, drumming on the wooden deck. I stepped outside and let it hit my face. Cold and clean. It felt good to Tom. I worked for the government for 30 years. Not the local government. The federal government. I did things I cannot talk about to people I cannot name. And when I retired, I came here to be quiet. I did not want anyone to know who I was or what I had done. I wanted to mow my lawn and drink coffee at the diner and vote in town elections and be left alone. I turned to look at him. He was still standing in the doorway, holding his cap with both hands. Do you understand what that means? I asked. I think so, he said. It means that when you saw me in handcuffs yesterday, and you did not speak up, you were not just letting a friend down. You were letting down a man who spent his whole career keeping people like Brian from stealing what did not belong to them. Not with guns. Not with force. With paperwork. With records. With knowing where the bodies were buried, figuratively speaking. Tom's face went pale. Mr. Ford, I didn't know about the fraud. The sheriff said the papers were in order. I had no reason to doubt. You had every reason, I said. Because you know Brian. You went to school with him. You know he has never held a steady job. You know he's been borrowing money from his mother's estate for years. You know Megan Ma ran a man who ran a pyramid scheme out of his basement. You know these things, Tom. But you chose to ignore them because it was easier. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. I walked back inside and closed the door. I'm not going to file a complaint against you. I'm not going to ask for your badge. But I am going to ask you to do something for me. Anything, he said. I want you to go through the department records from the last 6 months. Every complaint, every arrest, every incident involving Brian Ford or anyone associated with him. I want to know what he's been doing in this town while I was away. I want to know who he's been talking to. And I want to know where Megan is right now. Tom's eyes widened. You think Megan is involved too? I know she's involved, I said. She's my daughter. I raised her. She's smart, and she's patient, and she's always been better at hiding things than Brian. He's the blunt instrument. She's the planner. She's not going to sit still while her brother sits in a holding cell. She's going to try something. I need to know what. Tom nodded slowly. I can do that. It might take a couple of days. The records take a day, I said. Not 2. 1. He swallowed and nodded again. Yes, sir. He put his cap back on and walked out into the rain. I watched him get into his patrol car and drive away. The taillights disap red around the corner. I went back inside and made another cup of the terrible instant coffee. Jack was coming down the stairs now, rubbing his eyes and yawning. Tom Gray, he asked. Tom Gray. I said, he's a good kid. He's a good kid, I agreed. But good kids can be foolish. And foolish kids can make mistakes that cost them everything. I don't want that for him. Jack poured himself a cup of coffee, took one sip, and made a face. This is awful. You need a new percolator. I need a new everything, I said. Brian and his contractors threw out half the house. We'll buy new things, Jack said. We'll buy better things. And we'll make Megan pay for them. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, I said. First, we need to open the safe. We went down to the basement together. Jack brought a work light from his rental car, and I brought the brass key. The third brick came out easily, and I inserted the key into the lock. This time, I turned it all the way. The safe door swung open. Inside were 4 things. A stack of manila folders, stuffed with papers. A small velvet pouch, heavy with coins. A leather-bound photograph album, worn at the edges. And a single, sealed envelope with my wife's handwriting on the front. It said, "For Henry, when he needs it most." I left the folders and the pouch and the album where they were. I took the envelope and held it in both hands. The paper was brittle with age. The ink had faded to a pale blue. Jack stood behind me, silent. He knew not to speak. I opened the envelope carefully, using my thumbnail to slit the seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper. My wife's handwriting, careful and precise. I read it in silence. Then I read it again. Dad, Jack asked. What does it say? I folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. It says your mother was ruder than all of us put together. She knew about Megan and Brian. She knew what they were doing. She predicted every move they made, almost a year before she died. Jack's face hardened. She knew, and she didn't say anything. She didn't have the energy to fight, I said. She was sick. She was tired. She wanted to spend her last months in peace. But she left me the tools to fight after she was gone. I held up the envelope. This is the key to everything. Not just the safe. Everything. I put the envelope in my shirt pocket, next to my HRT. Then I took out the folders and CA-ried them upstairs. Jack followed with the pouch and the album that we spread everything out on the kitchen counter. The folders were full of bank statements, investment records, property deeds, and legal correspondence spanning 40 years. They told a story I had never told anyone, not even my children. A story of quiet deals and quiet favors, of friendships made in difficult places and kept for a lifetime. I had never touched the money in those accounts. I had never needed to. But now, I had a feeling I would need every penny of it. The velvet pouch held gold coins. American Eagles, all dated before the war. My father had given them to me, and his father had given them to him. I had always thought of them as a relic, a sentimental piece of the past. But they were also wealth. Solid, untraceable, negotiable wealth. The photograph album was filled with pictures of my wife and me, from our EARLY days in the service. Before the children, before the house, before everything got complicated. There were pictures of us in places I could not name, standing with people whose faces I could not forget. I closed the album and set it aside. This all stays here, I said. Not in a bank. Not with a lawyer. Here. I want to be able to look at it when I need to remember what I'm fighting for. Jack nodded. He understood that we spent the rest of the morning organizing the files. Peter Morrison arrived at noon with a briefcase full of legal pads and a grim expression. He had already spoken to the district attorney, he said. Brian was being held without bail pending a hearing on the fraud charges. Kevin Riss was being investigated by the State Bar Association. Megan, Peter said, is another matter. She wasn't in town when the police went looking for her. I've got people trying to track her down, but she's been SMART. She left her phone at her house. She's not using credit cards. She's staying off the grid. She's on the grid, I said. She just doesn't want us to find her. But she'll surface. She's too attached to her comfort to stay hidden for long. She'll call one of her friends. She'll try to get money out of one of the accounts she thinks I don't know about. She'll make a mistake. She's your daughter, Peter said ruefully. Are you sure you want to pursue this to the end? I looked at him. He had known me for 50 years. He knew the answer before I said it. She stopped being my daughter the day she signed off on Brian's plan to put me in a nursing home and sell my house, I said. I gave her every chance. I gave her a home. I gave her an education. I gave her a trust fund she didn't even know about. And she threw it all away because she wanted more. She always wanted more. Peter nodded and made a note in his legal pad. I'll get a subpoena for her financial records. If she's touched any of your accounts, we'll trace her. Do that, I said. That afternoon, I went back to the basement and pulled out the old record player. It was still there, tucked behind the furnace, covered in a sheet. I ried it upstairs and set it on the counter. The power had been cut, but Jack ran an extension cord from the neighbor's house. I put on the first record I could find. Ella Fitzgerald, singing a song my wife used to hum while she cooked dinner. The sound filled the empty rooms, warm and familiar. I stood in the middle of the kitchen with Jack and Peter, and I let the music wash over me. The rain was still falling outside. The dumpster was still in the driveway. The house was still erect. But I was home. And I was not going anywhere. End of Chapter 2. Chapter 3. Megan surfaces in a place nobody expects. A confrontation that has been years in the making. The truth about the old doctor and the forged diagnosis. And a decision that will change everything. Subscribe now to read the next chapter first. There are more secrets to uncover, more debts to settle, and more justice to be served. Don't wait. Subscribe today. Megan Ford did not run to a beach or a mountain cabin. She did not hide with a friend in a neighboring state. She did not even leave the county. She went to the one place she thought I would never look. The old Albright house on Cedar Lane, where the disgraced doctor had lived before he lost his license and moved out in the middle of the night. The place had been empty for 2 years, condemned by the town for structural issues. Nobody went there. Nobody read about it. It was the perfect place for a woman who needed to disappear. Tom Gray found her on the 3rd day. He had been going through the police records like I asked, cross-referencing names and dates and locations. He noticed a pattern. Dr. Albright had been making calls to the same number in the weeks before Brian filed the power of attorney. Tom traced the number. It was a burner phone, but the tower logs placed it consistently in the Albright house. He drove out there on a hunch. and he saw Megan Car parked behind the collapsed GA raged. He called me instead of his supervisor. Mr. Ford, she's here. I'm parked down the street. What do you want me to do? Nothing, I said. Stay where you are. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Jack was out running errands. I went alone. The rain had stopped, but the roads were still wet and slick with fallen leaves. I drove slow, the way old men drive, but my mind was moving fast. I had raised Megan since she was 6 years old. She was not my blood, but I had never made a distinction. I taught her how to ride a bike. I walked her to school on the first day of kindergarten. I sat through every school play and every parent-teacher conference and every tearful argument about curfews. I loved her the way a father loves a daughter. And she had betrayed me anyway. That the Albright house was a 2-story Victorian that had once been beautiful. Now the paint was peeling, the porch sagged, and the windows were boa-rided over. I pulled up behind Tom's patrol car and got out. Mr. Ford. Tom walked over, his boots crunching on the gravel. She's inside. I saw her move past the front window about 10 minutes ago. She doesn't know I'm here. Good, I said. Stay out here. If she tries to run, stop her. But don't hurt her. Yes, sir. I walked up the cracked front steps and knocked on the door. The wood was swollen from years of rain and neglect. My knuckles made a dull sound. Megan, I called. I know you're in there. Come out. We need to talk. Silence. Then footsteps. The door opened a few inches, and I saw her face in the narrow gap. She looked tired. Her hair was pulled back in a hasty ponytail, and she was wearing old jeans and a sweatshirt that did not belong to her. She had been sleeping rough, probably in the back room where the roof still held. Dad, she said. Her voice was flat. No surprise, no guilt, no anger. Just flat. Are you going to let me in? I asked. She hesitated. Then she opened the door wide and stepped back. I walked into the house. The inside was worse than the outside. Holes in the floor, water stains on the ceiling, the smell of mildew and dust. A single camping lantern sat on the floor in the front room, casting a weak circle of light. Classy, I said. This is what you chose over the house I gave you. She folded her arms. You didn't give me anything. You gave everything to Jack. I got the scraps. I always got the scraps. Megan, you had a trust fund. You had a college education. You had a wedding I paid for, and a down payment on a house I gave you, and a car I bought for you when you graduated. What scraps? She laughed. A bitter, cold laugh. You think that counts? The trust fund was a joke. $20,000 RS. Jack got millions. I know about the investments, Dad. I found the old statements in the basement. You hid them from me. You hid everything from me. Those investments, I said seriously, were made with money your mother inherited from her family. It was never mine to give. It was hers, and she left it to Jack because he was the only one she trusted to use it well. She loved you too, but she knew you. She knew you would burn through it in a year and come back asking for more. Megan's face twisted. That's a lie. She loved me. She told me she loved me. She did, I said. But love and trust are not the same thing. I loved you too. I still do. That's why I'm here. She read at me, and for a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Doubt, maybe. Or regret. It was gone before I could name it. What do you want? She asked. I want you to tell me the truth, I said. About the doctor. About the diagnosis. About the plan you and Brian Seeled kept up while I was in Montana. She did not answer right away. She walked to the lantern and turned the dial, making the light brighter. It wasn't supposed to go this way, she said quietly. We were just going to sell the house and put you in a nice place. A good place. Not a nursing home. One of those assisted living communities where you have your own apartment and people come to check on you. You would have been comfortable. Without my consent. You were never going to consent. You're too stubborn. You would have stayed in that house until you died, and then we would have had to deal with probate and taxes and all that nonsense. We were trying to make it easier. For everyone. Including you, I thought. But I did not say it. And the Alzheimer's diagnosis, I asked as she looked away. That was Brian's idea. He found the doctor. Dr. Albright needed money, and he was willing to sign whatever we put in front of him. It wasn't supposed to hold up in court. It was just supposed to be enough to convince the real estate agent and the buyers. A temporary thing. A temporary thing, I repeated. You forged medical records to steal my house, and you call it temporary. She did not have an answer for that. I walked to the boa ride window and looked out through the slats. Tom was still standing by his patrol car, watching the house. I could see his hand resting on his holster, ready but not drawn. He was a good kid. He had Leah Renetta's lesson. Megan, I said, I'm going to give you a choice. You can come with me now. You can come back to the house, and we can sit down with Peter Morrison and figure out how to fix this. You will have to face the consequences of what you did. There will be charges. There will be a trial. But I will do everything I can to make sure you get a fair sentence, and I will visit you in whatever place they send you to. Or, she said, or you stay here, and I let the police do what they were going to do anyway. You will be arrested. You will be charged. You will go to jail, and I will not be coming to visit. She read at me. You wouldn't do that. I'm your daughter. You are I said. And I love you. That's why I'm giving you the choice. But I'm not going to save you from yourself, Megan. I can't. I've been saving you your whole life, and it never made a difference. You always found a way to want more. You always found a way to blame me for what you didn't have. This time, you went too far, and I can't fix it. Her eyes filled with tears. For a second, she looked like the little girl I used to see RRY on my shoulders through the parquet. Then the mask came back, and the tears were gone. I'm not going back with you, she said. I nodded. Then I'll wait outside. I walked out of the house and down the steps. Tom met me at the bottom. Mr. Ford, she's not coming Riley, I said. Call it in. Tell them she's here. But tell them to come gently. No tasers. No rough handling. She's still my daughter. Tom nodded and reached for his radio. I stood on the wet grass and watched the clouds roll across the sky. The rain was done, but the air was heavy with the promise of more. It took 20 minutes for the backup to arrive. 2 patrol cars and an UNMA RCED vehicle from the county sheriff's office. I recognized the deputy who got out of the second car, Jenkins. I had played poker with him at the VFW hall every other Friday for 5 years. He walked over to me, his face grim. Mr. Ford, I'm sorry it came to this. It is what it is, I said. Just be refill with her. We will, he said. They went inside. I heard voices, calm and professional. Then I heard Megan's voice, rising and RP and angry. I could not make out the words, but I did not need to. I knew them by heart. They were the same words she had said to me 100 times before. It was not fair. She was not the bad one. Everyone was against her. She came out in handcuffs. Her eyes were red and swollen. She saw me standing by the patrol car, and she spat on the ground at my feet. You're dead to me, she said. I know, I said. But I'll still be at your trial. I'll still be in the gallery. And I'll still be your father, even if you don't want me to be. She said something else, something ugly, but I did not hear it. The deputies put her in the back of the car and drove away. Tom followed in his own vehicle, leaving me standing alone in the RD of the abandoned house. I looked at the boa ride windows and the sagging porch and the weeds growing through the cracks in the driveway. This was where my daughter had chosen to hide. This was where she had made her last stand. I walked back to my own car and sat behind the wheel for a long time. The engine ticked as it led. The clouds thickened overhead. I thought about my wife. About the letter she had left me in the safe. She had written it when she knew she was dying, and she had filled it with advice about how to handle the children. She had known they would try something. She had seen it coming. And she had told me, in her refill, gentle handwriting, to do what I had to do. Don't let your heart make you foolish, she had written. You gave them everything. They chose to waste it. That's not your fault. That's not your cross to carry. Let them carry their own. I read the letter 5 more times over the next 2 days. I read it in the kitchen, with the record player spinning Ella Fitzgerald. I read it in the basement, sitting on the concrete floor. I read it in my bedroom, the room I had read with her for 30 years, now empty of everything except the bed frame. On the 3rd day after Megan's arrest, I went to see Peter Morrison. He had a draft of the complaint ready, and he went over the charges with me one by one. Fraud, conspiracy, forgery, attempted grand larceny. The list was long, and it covered both Brian and Megan. Are you sure about this? Peter asked. Once I file, there's no taking it back. I'm sure, I said. He filed it that afternoon. The local paper ran a story on the front page. Local man's children face charges in estate theft plot. The article was short and light on details, but it was enough. By the end of the week, everyone in town knew what had happened. The neighbors stopped looking at me with pity. They looked at me with respect. They looked at me with a new kind of wariness, as if they had suddenly realized the quiet old man who walked his dog every morning was not quite what he seemed. Old Morris came over with a bottle of whiskey and a pack of CARDS. We sat on the porch and played rummy until the sun went down. I always knew you had something in you, he said, shuffling the deck with practiced ease. You never talked about yourself. That's the sign of a man who has something to hide. But you hid it well, better than most. It's not about hiding, I said. It's about choosing what to share. And with whom? He nodded and dealt the CARDS. Fair enough. So what do you do now? Sell the house? Move to Florida, get a new set of kids? I laughed. No. I stay. I fix the place up. I live out the rest of my years right here. In the same house where all this happened, especially because it happened, I said. This house is mine. It was mine before the kids. It will be mine after they're gone. And I'm not going to let the memories they tried to steal take that away from me. Morris raised his glass. To stubborn old men. I raised mine. To stubborn old men. We drank, and we played CARDS, and we watched the STARS come out one by one. The street was quiet. The neighbors had gone inside. The world was still. It was not peace, but it was close. End of Chapter 3. Chapter 4. The trial begins. Old friends and new allies come four-way road. The truth about my past finally comes out in court, and Brian and Megan face the music. Subscribe now to read the next chapter. The courtroom drama is just heating up, and there's a surprise witness you won't want to miss. Subscribe today and stay ahead of every twist. The courthouse was built in 1912, and it had not changed much since. The marble floors were worn smooth by a century of footsteps. The benches in the gallery were polished oak, hard and unyielding. The ceiling rose high above us, painted with faded murals of justice and mercy. I had been in this room twice before, once to serve on a jury and once to watch a friend get sworn in as a magistrate. Both times, I had felt a quiet respect for the place. Now, sitting in the front row behind the prosecution table, I felt something else. I felt the weight of YRS. Jack sat next to me. Peter Morrison was at the table with the district attorney, a RP woman named C.A. Roll Benson, who had a reputation for being fair but relentless. She had reviewed the evidence fully, and she had told me privately that she thought we had a strong case. Strong, but not perfect. Brian and Megan had good lawyers. Kevin Riss had been replaced by a slick defense attorney from the city, a man named Raymond Cross who wore suspenders and spoke in long, polished sentences. That the courtroom was full. Local reporters, curious neighbors, the usual gallery of people with nothing better to do. Old Morris was in the back row, wearing his best jacket. Tom Gray sat NEA or the door, in uniform. He had been subpoenaed as a witness, but he was not on the stand yet. He looked nervous, but steady. The bailiff called the court to order, and Judge Miriam Rouleau walked in. She was a small woman with steel gray hair and glasses on a chain. She had been on the bench for 20 years, and she did not suffer fools. I had seen her give a speeding ticket lecture that made a truck driver cry. Case number 487, State versus Brian Ford and Megan Ford Repair, she said. Counsel, are you ready? Benson and Cross both said yes. The judge nodded and gestured for the proceedings to begin. C.A. Roll Benson opened with a statement that was short and direct. She laid out the timeline. The forged power of attorney. The fake medical diagnosis. The attempted sale of property belonging to a vulnerable elderly man. She did not use the word elderly with pity. She used it with precision. She described me as a retired federal employee who had lived in the community for 30 years, a man with no history of cognitive decline, a man whose children had conspired to steal his home. Then she called her first witness, Dr. Samuel Albright. That the doctor was a broken man. He had been a respected physician once, with a thriving practice and a comfortable life. Now he was bankrupt, disgraced, and facing charges of his own. He had cut a deal with the prosecution to testify against Brian and Megan in exchange for a reduced sentence. He walked to the stand with his shoulders hunched and his head down. Benson asked him about the diagnosis. He admitted, in a voice so quiet the microphone's BA relay picked it up, that he had never examined me. He had never reviewed my medical records. He had signed the documents based on a brief conversation with Brian, who had told him I was showing signs of dementia. Did you verify those claims? Benson asked. No, he said. Did you perform any tests? No. Did you have any reason to believe Mr. Ford was suffering from cognitive impairment? No. I took the word of his son. His stepson, Benson corrected. The doctor nodded miserably. His stepson. Cross objected, but the judge overruled him. The testimony stood. The jury, a panel of 12 local men and women, took notes. Some of them shook their heads. I saw one woman, a retired nurse, press her lips together in a thin line of disapproval. The second witness was a real estate agent named Linda H.A. Ripper. She had been the one handling the sale of my house. She testified that Brian had presented her with the power of attorney and the medical diagnosis, and that she had been satisfied the sale was legitimate. She had not done any independent verification. She had not called my prima re physician. She had taken the documents at face value. Did you have any concerns? Benson asked. I thought it was odd, Linda said. Mr. Ford had always seemed sharp to me. I sold him the house next door to his own property a few years ago, and he was on top of every detail. But the documents looked official, and Brian was very persuasive. Did you contact Mr. Ford directly? No. Brian told me he was out of the country and unreachable. Did you try to reach him? I trusted the paperwork. The judge looked at Linda with an expression that suggested she had heard this excuse 1,000 times. She wrote something down and moved on. The third witness was Tom Gray. He walked to the stand with his cap under his arm. He had been coached by Benson, but he did not need much coaching. He told the jury about the day he arrested me. He described the scene with clear professional detachment. Brian had been smiling. Kevin H.A. Riss had been taking notes. And I had been standing in my own front yard, handcuffed, with a look of quiet resignation on my face. Did it strike you as wrong? Benson asked. I didn't think about it at the time, Tom said. I followed procedure. But later, when I read the truth, I realized I had made a mistake. Were you influenced by Mr. Ford's reputation in the community? Tom looked at me. His eyes were steady. I was influenced by the fact that I knew him. I knew he was a good man. But I let myself believe the paperwork instead of believing what I knew in my gut. That was my error. Cross objected to the word good, calling it character testimony. The judge overruled him. Tom was allowed to finish. The prosecution rested its case at the end of the second day. Raymond Cross called his first witness the following morning. He called Megan. She walked to the stand in a neat blue dress, her hair brushed, and her makeup refully applied. She looked like the girl I remembered. The girl who used to sit on my lap and ask for bedtime stories. The girl who had asked me to walk her down the aisle on her wedding day. She looked at me once, briefly, and then she looked away. Cross asked her about her childhood, about her relationship with me. She spoke in a soft, measured voice, painting a picture of a distant father who favored her brother, who withheld love and money, who made her feel like she was always the second choice. Was that true? Cross asked. Did you feel neglected? I did, she said. My father was never there. He was always working, always traveling. Jack got everything. I got whatever was left over. Cross nodded sympathetically. And when you discovered that your father had substantial assets you had never known about, did that make you feel resentful? Of course it did, she said. He had been hiding money from us for years. He had investments we didn't know about. He had gold. He had all these things, and he never told us. We were his children. We deserved to know. Did you plan to steal from him? No, she said firmly. I wanted to protect him. I was worried about him. Brian and I both were. We thought the house was too much for him. We thought he needed help. The diagnosis was a mistake, and I regret that. But we never wanted to hurt him. I sat in my chair and listened. I did not get angry. I had expected this. Megan had always been a good liar. She believed her own lies most of the time. Cross continued with his questions, leading her through a refully crafted narrative of concern and misunderstanding. She played the part well. She shed a tear when she talked about her mother. She talked about how much she missed her, how she was just trying to honor her mother's wishes. Then C.A. Roll Benson stood up for the cross-examination. Ms. Ford H.A. Ripper, she said. You mentioned your father's assets. The investments. The gold. How did you know about them? Megan hesitated. I found old documents in the basement. When last year? When we were clearing out the house. Clearing it out for the sale? No. Clearing it out for the renovation. But the renovation was part of the sale plan. Wasn't it the buyers wanted a renovated house? Megan's face tightened. We were going to renovate it before we listed it. Even though you knew your father would be living there, he wasn't going to be living there. We had already arranged for him to move to the assisted living community. Without his consent, we thought it was in his best interest. Benson changed tack. Ms. Ford H.A. Ripper, you mentioned the trust fund. $20,000 RS, you said. Did you know that your father also set up a SEPA rate account for you, an account that he never told you about, because he was saving it for your retirement? Megan blinked. What account? Benson pulled a document from her folder and handed it to the judge. This is a bank statement from a brokerage account opened in Ms. Ford H.A. Ripper's name. The balance is currently $640,000 RS. The account has been funded annually with contributions from Mr. Ford's personal salary. He never drew from it. He never touched it. It was meant to be a gift to you for your old age. The courtroom went silent. Megan Sta read at the document. Her face changed. The composure cracked, and something raw and real showed through. For a moment, she looked like a child who had just been told the worst news of her life. I didn't know, she said. Her voice was small. I know you didn't, Benson said. Because your father never told you. He never told anyone. He wanted it to be a surprise. He wanted you to have something to fall back on when you needed it. That's the kind of man he is. Megan turned and looked at me. Her eyes were wet. Dad, I did not say anything. I just looked at her. Benson continued. Ms. Ford H.A. Ripper, you said earlier that you were acting out of love, that you wanted to protect your father. But you were also angry. Angry about the money you thought you were being denied. Angry that Jack got more. Angry that your father wasn't the way you wanted him to be. And that anger led you to do something unforgivable. You tried to take what was his. And you would have succeeded if he hadn't come home. EARLY. Megan's shoulders sta root to shake. I didn't know, she whispered again, but you knew about the doctor. You knew about the forged diagnosis. You knew your father was Shah RP and capable, and you went along with it anyway. Megan looked at her lawyer. Cross was shaking his head, but he could not stop her. The truth was out now, and everyone could see it. She was not a victim. She was not a loving daughter. She was a woman who had tried to steal from her father and had gotten caught at the cross-examination ended. Megan stepped down from the stand and walked back to the defense table. She did not look at me again. The trial lasted 3 more days. Brian took the stand and tried to argue that he had been manipulated by his sister. He claimed he had believed the diagnosis was real, but the jury did not believe him. The evidence was too strong. The forged documents, the secret meetings, the lies to the real estate agent. It all added up to a clear picture of deliberate fraud. On the last day, the jury deliberated for just 2 hours. They came back with guilty verdicts on all charges. Brian and Megan were both convicted of fraud, conspiracy, and attempted grand larceny. Brian received a sentence of 5 to 8 years. Megan received 3 to 5 because she had shown some cooperation and because the judge took her age and lack of prior record into account. I sat in the front row as the sentences were read. Jack put his hand on my shoulder. Peter Morrison leaned over and whispered that he would file an appeal on their behalf, but he did not think it would succeed. When the hearing was over, I walked out of the courthouse into the weak autumn sunlight. Old Morris was waiting on the steps. He handed me a cup of coffee from the diner. It's over, he said. It's over. I agreed. But I knew it was not really over. The guilt and shame would linger for years. The family I had tried to build was broken. The children I had loved were now strangers. And I would carry that with me until the day I died. But I had done the right thing. I had told the truth. I had let the law take its course. And I had not let my heart make me foolish, the way my wife had warned me. I took a sip of the coffee. It was hot and strong, the way I liked it. Let's go home, I said. And I did. End of chapter 4. Final chapter, Aftermath. The house is rebuilt. New friends, new purpose. I tell my full story to a reporter, and the town finally knows who I really am. A last visit to Megan and Brian. And a quiet, peaceful ending. Subscribe now to read the final chapter and see how it all wraps up. Don't miss the conclusion. Subscribe today. The house took 6 months to rebuild. I did not hire contractors this time. I did it myself, with Jack's help on the weekends and Old Morris's advice on the days when the work got too heavy. We replaced the drywall, painted the rooms, laid new flooring in the kitchen. I found a percolator at a garage sale and bought it for $2 RS. It made better coffee than the old one ever had. I put my wife's records back on the shelf. I hung her pictures on the walls. I brought in new furniture, simple and sturdy, the kind that would last. The house sta route to feel like a home again. Not the same home as before, but a new one. A home that had been through a war and come out stronger on the other side. The town did not forget what had happened. People stopped me on the street to shake my hand. They asked questions, ca refill at first, then bolder. They wanted to know about my past. They wanted to know about the work I had done before I came to this quiet place. I told them some things. Not everything. Enough. A reporter from the regional paper came to interview me. Her name was Laura Hayes, a young woman with sharp eyes and a notepad that was always full. She had heard the rumors and wanted the real story. I invited her to my porch. We sat in the afternoon sun, and I told her the broad strokes. The IRS and the Foreign Service. The difficult places. The quiet work that did not make headlines. She wrote a long piece, 2 pages with photographs, and ran it on the front of the Sunday edition. The headline said, "From Washington to Willow Creek, the quiet life of a forgotten servant." It was not quite accurate, but it was respectful. It told the truth without making me sound like a hero. I was never a hero. I was just a man who had done a job and then retired to a place where nobody asked questions. That after the article came out, I got letters. Some from old colleagues who had thought I was dead. Some from strangers who had read the story and wanted to thank me for work they did not fully understand. I answered a few of them. The rest I filed away in a box under the bed. They were nice to have, but they were not what I needed. What I needed was closure. That came on a gray Tuesday in April. I drove to the state correctional facility where Megan was being held. It was a 2-hour drive through rolling hills and small towns. I had not seen her since the trial. She had not written. She had not called. I did not expect her to welcome me, but I went anyway. That the visiting room was clean and cold. Fluorescent lights. Plastic chairs bolted to the floor. A glass partition with a telephone on each side. I sat down and waited. She came in after a few minutes. She was thinner. Her hair was shorter, and she had RK circles under her eyes. She wore the Standa RD prison uniform, drab and shapeless. She picked up the phone on her side. I picked up mine. "Hi, Dad." She said, "Hi, Megan." We sat in silence for a moment. The sound of our breathing was loud in the plastic receiver. "Why did you come?" she asked. Her voice was flat, but I could hear something underneath it. Hurt, maybe. Or hope. I could not tell. "Because you're my daughter," I said. "And I wanted to see how you were doing." "I'm in prison." "How do you think I'm doing?" "Not great," I admitted. "But better than some. You have a release date in 2 years. You can get out, and you can start over. That's more than a lot of people get." She looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. 2 years in here. 2 years of this. And then what? I have no money. I have no job. I have no husband anymore. He left me the day I was convicted. He took everything I had left. He took what you let him take, I said. But that's not the point. The point is, you have a future. You just have to decide what to do with it. She shook her head slowly. You don't get it. You never got it. You had everything. The career, the respect, the money. You could have given us everything, and you chose not to. You chose to hold back. I let her talk. She needed to say it. I had Leah reneged that over the IRS. Sometimes people need to let the poison out before they can start to heal. When she was done, I spoke. I gave you everything I could, Megan. Everything I thought you needed. I gave you love, and I gave you a home, and I gave you the freedom to make your own choices. You made bad ones. That's not my fault. But I'm still here. I'm still your father. And if you want to have a relationship with me after you get out, I'm willing to try. She read at me. Why would you do that after everything I did? Because that's what fathers do, I said. We don't give up on our children, even when they give up on themselves. She did not say anything for a long time. Then she put the phone down and walked away. I watched her go. She did not turn back. I drove home in the rain. It was a quiet drive, with the wipers beating time against the windshield. I stopped at a diner on the way and had a cup of coffee and a piece of pie. The waitress asked if I was okay. I said I was fine. I was not fine, but I was getting there. A week later, I visited Brian. His facility was different from Megan's. Tougher. More guardias. More bed wire. Brian had made enemies inside because of his arrogance. He was not adjusting well. He sat across from me with his arms crossed and his jaw tight. He refused to say anything for the first 10 minutes. I did not push him. I just sat there, waiting. Finally, he spoke. You won. Happy? I'm not happy, I said. Nobody wins in this situation. You lost. Megan lost. I lost. The only difference is, I can go home to a YRM house and a decent meal. You can't. You think I don't know that? I think you don't want to admit it, I said. I think you're still angry, and you're still blaming me, and you're still refusing to see that you did this to yourself. He slammed his hand on the table. You never wanted me. You never accepted me. You were always looking at me like I was some kind of outsider. You made me feel like a stranger in my own house. You never gave me a chance. I looked at him, and for the first time, I saw the boy he used to be. The SCA red, angry boy who had lost his father and been forced into a new family with a man he did not trust. I had done my best. I had tried to be patient, but I had failed him in ways I was only now beginning to understand. You're right, I said. I didn't always make it easy for you. I could have done better. I should have done better. But that doesn't excuse what you did. Nothing excuses that. He looked away. His anger had run out, and what was left was just sadness. Deep, heavy sadness. I don't know what I'm going to do when I get out, he said. I have nothing. No money, no job, no future. You have a future, I said. You just have to decide what to make of it. I can't do that for you, but I can help you get STA root. If you want. He looked at me with suspicion. Why would you help me? Because you're my son, I said. Not by blood, but that never mattered to me. You were my son from the day I married your mother. And that doesn't change just because we hurt each other. He turned away, but I saw the TRS in his eyes before he hid them. I left that visit with a strange feeling in my chest. Not forgiveness, not peace, but something close. A beginning. The rest of the year passed quietly. Jack moved back to Washington, but he visited often. We talked on the phone every Sunday. He had found a woman he wanted to marry, and he brought her to meet me in the fall. Her name was Elena, and she was kind and patient, and she made him laugh. I gave them my blessing. Old Morris still came over for CARDS every Friday. We played rummy and drank whiskey and talked about the old days. He had been a mechanic in the ARMA, and he told stories about fixing trucks in places where the roads were just dirt and hope. I told him stories about my own time overseas. He listened and nodded and did not ask too many questions. In November, I got a letter from Megan. It was short and written in CA deliberate handwriting. She said she was sorry. She said she was trying to get help. She asked if I would visit her again. I wrote back and said I would. In December, the town held a small ceremony to honor me. The mayor gave a speech about community and service and gratitude. They gave me a plaque. I put it on my mantelpiece, next to my wife's photograph that it snowed on Christmas Eve. Jack and Elena came up from Washington. We had dinner in the kitchen, the same dinner my wife used to make. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans. It was not fancy, but it was good. After dinner, we sat by the fireplace and listened to Ella Fitzgerald on the old record player. Jack asked me if I missed her. My wife. I said yes, every day. He asked me if I was lonely. I thought about it. The house was quiet. The town was quiet. My children were in prison. My wife was gone. My friends were old and getting older. Sometimes, I said. But loneliness is not the same as being alone. I have you. I have this house. I have the memories. And I have the knowledge that I did the right thing, even when it was hard. He nodded and put his arm around Elena. I looked out the window at the snow falling softly on the street. The neighbors had their lights on, YRM and golden against the white. I could see old Morris's house across the way, and I knew he was sitting in his armchair with a glass of something strong, watching the same snow. The world kept turning. The seasons kept changing. And I kept living. It was not a perfect life, but it was mine. And I was grateful for every minute of it. End of chapter 5. Thank you for reading this story. If you enjoyed it, please consider subscribing to support more tales like this one. There are more stories waiting to be told, more characters to meet, and more worlds to explore. Your subscription keeps the words flowing and the stories alive. Subscribe today and never miss a chapter. Thank you for your time and your support. I'll see you in the next one.